Like an improv show, companies and life are unscripted. They start with nothing. Everyone's just figuring it out as they go. Take it from me, I was 15 when I started a company, and I surely had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't even had a job before. I went on to work with hundreds of business leaders as an entrepreneur and investor, and I realized no two stories were the same. There was no right way to start a company. Whether they realize it or not, entrepreneurs are improv comedians with worse senses of humor. Both create something out of nothing, make decisions based on customer feedback, and spend several years of their lives sleeping on couches and surviving off ramen. Great improvisers and great leaders adapt to change, build trust among teams, communicate clearly, and make decisions with limited information. Considering these similarities, I and others have discovered a few things that improv comedy can teach leaders. First, say yes and. Yes and is a central idea in improv. It means acknowledging reality and then building on it. So if I'm in an improv scene with someone who says, "We're on a rocket ship," and I say, "No, we're in a bakery," that kills the scene. If I say, "Yes, and there's an alien," then we're building something together. The principle of yes and applied to business helps us innovate, because you can't create something out of nothing by saying no. New ideas and new companies happen when we say yes. As a teenager, I couldn't get great gelato in my hometown in Michigan. I also couldn't get a job. I acknowledged the reality of my inspired yet unemployed self, said yes, and started a gelato business, which is still going strong today. Yes and also helps us solve problems. When something goes wrong, the typical reaction is, "No!" Instead, say yes and solve the problem. Because it is only when we acknowledge the reality of what is happening that we can move forward and figure out a solution. If the gelato case accidentally churns off overnight and you wake up to gelato soup, acknowledge that reality and grab a spoon. The second helpful principle of improv is the belief that there are no mistakes. In improv, everything that happens in a scene is a gift, providing us information about what's going on. Every word, every movement, every facial expression, every awkward silence. It's all helping us write that script in real time, just like in real life. This no mistakes attitude helps us think creatively, feel confident, and make decisions. For instance, we opened a gelato shop in a location that lost a lot of money. So we pivoted and launched our branded gelato pints to sell to grocery stores. And that helped us grow. What initially seemed like a mistake and a failure actually led us to a wonderful opportunity. The third principle of improv is to play the scene you're in. Be present and pay attention to what's going on. Be with who you're with, be where you are, and be doing what you're doing. The present moment is all we have in an improv scene and in life. When I was an investor, I would ask entrepreneurs questions about their companies, and then they would say, "I'll get to that later in the presentation." They would continue on their script. In doing this, they didn't raise money. Though I was engaged in asking questions, which meant that I was interested, it was throwing them off. If you don't have the flexibility of mind to veer off script, you lose your connection with the audience, or in this case, investors. In an improv show, you might get less applause. In a pitch meeting, you will not close the deal. Being present also helps us connect with and build trust among our colleagues. Try looking a colleague directly in the eye, silently, for an entire minute. I guarantee you'll feel closer to that person. Then have a conversation with a twist. Use the last word that person says as your first word, like this: "I love chocolate." Chocolate makes me think of dessert. Dessert is something I love to eat after dinner. In doing this, we realize how rarely we actually listen to everything someone has to say before we start to think about what we are going to say next. In business and life, we tend to get in our own heads instead of being present, listening deeply, and then reacting. And if we're going to create from nothing and be able to prepare for whatever comes our way, we need to let go of our own ideas and expectations so that we react to reality instead of panic when something doesn't go as planned. And finally, if it feels weird, do it. Improv is fun, and comedy is created when we do the unusual thing. In business and life, sometimes the best decision is not the most obvious one. With improv, we can try new things in a safe and supportive environment, encouraging us to make new choices, break old patterns, and prepare to handle whatever comes our way. For me, improv felt weird. I was a very type A, organized person. But I said yes and started practicing improv, and that led me to be a better entrepreneur, business leader, and human. And it can for you too. Say yes, and over time, practicing improv will help you handle anything that comes your way, whether a growing business, a struggling business, or some melted gelato. Thank you.